My name is Elias. I'm 29 years old, and this was supposed to be the day I finally proved I had made it. After years of disciplined saving and grinding as a software engineer, I had finally secured my dream house. I invited my entire bloodline for a grand housewarming, imagining the laughter and the pride in my father's eyes. Instead, I stood in my foyer, staring at a mountain of expensive catering. No one showed up. As the silence grew deafening, I pulled out my phone, and my heart didn't just sink, it shattered. My entire family was across town, clinking glasses at my brother Julian's last-minute apartment warming. Just as the shadows in my empty living room began to stretch, my message from Mom lit up the screen. Talk now. Before I reveal the fallout of that message, tell me, where are you listening from today? Drop your city in the comments. If you've ever been the responsible one who felt invisible, hit that like button and subscribe. We're building a community here for those who chose to grow through the drama. I grew up in a quiet pocket of suburban Seattle. Tree-lined streets, colonial homes, a picture-perfect middle-class life. My parents, Arthur and Martha, were the pillars of the community. Dad was a tax consultant, and Mom taught elementary school. We never lacked the basics, but every luxury was weighed on a scale of necessity. From the crib, it was obvious Julian was the golden child. 3 years my junior, he was everything I wasn't. He was the athlete, the social butterfly, the one who walked into a room and owned the air. I was the basement kid, the one who spent his weekends taking apart circuit boards, while Julian was the star quarterback, bringing home plastic trophies that my parents treated like Olympic gold. Julian wasn't a villain back then, just effortlessly charming. But behind that easy grin was a streak of toxic dynamic behavior and irresponsibility that Arthur and Martha were pathologically blind to. He'd blow off chores or miss curfew, and somehow, he'd charm his way out of it with a wink. Meanwhile, I lived under a microscope. One late assignment meant a 3-hour lecture on potential and legacy. My passion for code was seen as a quirky hobby. I still ache when I think about my junior year. I won the state coding championship, the biggest moment of my life. The ceremony was on a Saturday morning, the same hour as one of Julian's regular season games. I stood on that stage, clutching my plaque, searching the crowd for my parents. I only found Aunt Clara. "They're so sorry, Elias," she whispered later, "but you know how critical these scouts are for Julian's future." College only widened the canyon between how we were treated. I was accepted into the University of Washington's computer science program, a massive achievement. But the celebration was cut short when my father saw the tuition bill. "We'll contribute what we can, Elias," they said, "but you're the capable one. You'll need to figure out loans and work." And I did. I pulled 60-hour weeks between a night shift tech support job and 2 other campus gigs, all while maintaining a grueling 4-point GPA. I was a ghost, fueled by caffeine and the fear of failure. Meanwhile, Julian cruised into Washington State on a partial football scholarship. When he flunked out of 3 classes and lost his funding after freshman year, Arthur and Martha didn't blink. They dipped deep into their retirement savings to cover his full tuition. "He's just finding his soul," they justified. "He needs the full experience." I graduated with honors, but the ceremony was a lonely affair. My parents showed up for the handshake, then checked their watches. They left before the keynote speaker finished because they had to drive 3 hours to Julian's end of the semester kegger. I tried to swallow the trauma of being second best and channeled that bitterness into my career. Over the next 5 years, I fought my way up to a senior role at a top-tier tech firm in Seattle. I was the software engineer everyone relied on. Julian? He was a professional drifter. Bartender, gym trainer, selling overpriced supplements. My parents announced every new start like he'd just been elected CEO. Each time he failed, he'd crawl back to their guest room, living invisible and rent-free until his next big idea. Through all of it, I lived like a monk. I shared a cramped, noisy unit with 3 roommates despite my 6-figure salary. I drove a battered old sedan that rattled every time I hit 50. Every bonus, every tax refund, went straight into a high-yield account. I was a master of disciplined saving. My vision was laser-focused, a craftsman-style home in a quiet, mature neighborhood. I wanted a place with 1,920 seconds original woodwork. A sanctuary that wasn't just a building, but a fortress of my own making. I wanted a dining room large enough for a family that actually cared to show up. After 6 years of grinding, I finally had enough for a massive down payment. The Seattle market was a shark tank, but I was patient. I walked away from a dozen bidding wars until I found the one. It was a 1,928 craftsman with a stone porch and a backyard shaded by century-old cedars. The moment I stepped onto those creaking hardwood floors, I felt a warm glow I hadn't felt in years. This was it. The realtor, a sharp woman named Elena, told me it had just hit the market. I didn't hesitate. I wrote a letter to the sellers, pouring my heart out about how this house represented every sacrifice I'd ever made. 2 days later, the keys were mine. Throughout the closing, I shared every milestone in the family group chat. My mother sent a thumbs up. My father said, "Good investment, son." Julian? Silence. I told myself it was fine. I told myself that once they saw the sunlight streamed through the stained glass, they'd finally see me. For the next 3 weeks, I didn't just move in, I curated a masterpiece. I spent hours polishing the 1,920 original woodwork until the mahogany gleamed like a mirror. I skipped my usual overtime to paint the guest rooms in soft, welcoming earth tones. I splurged on a massive oak table that could seat 10, imagining my parents at the head and Julian finally looking at me with respect. I hung the art I had kept in cardboard boxes for years, the crown jewels of my quiet life. Every piece added felt like I was finally filling the healing holes in my soul. I wasn't just building a house, I was crafting a strength statement. With the finishing touches done, I sent out the digital invitations for a Saturday afternoon. Celebrate a new chapter, the header read. I provided the finest gourmet sandwiches and artisanal cheeses from a local boutique deli. I stocked the bar with a $300 bottle of the rare scotch my father loved, and the specific Napa Valley Chardonnay my mother always talked about. I even made sure to order specialized vegan trays for my cousin Chloe, who was always left out of Julian's pizza and beer bashes. I sent personal follow-up texts to everyone: Arthur, Martha, the grandparents, Aunt Clara, and all the cousins. The RSVPs flowed in. "Proud of you," Aunt Clara wrote. "We'll be there," Mom confirmed. Julian, as usual, stayed in the shadows of the group chat. 5 days before the party, I finally called him. "Hey, did you see the invite?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Julian's voice was thick with disinterest. "Yeah, man. I might swing by if my schedule clears. Congrats. I guess." 2 days later, my mother called with a brilliant idea. "Elias, since Julian is so busy looking at apartments, why don't your father and I just pick him up? That way, he's guaranteed to show." I felt a familiar pang of resentment. Even my housewarming was being turned into a logistical exercise to accommodate Julian's whims. "Fine, Mom," I sighed. "Just be here by 3. She then spent 20 minutes telling me about Julian's new breakthrough and how he was finally maturing, completely ignoring the fact that I was currently standing in a foreclosure-proof fortress I had bought entirely on my own. The morning of the party, the air was crisp and full of promise. I walked through my rooms, the sunlight streamed across the floors, creating a warm glow that made the house feel alive. I arranged the fresh flowers, placing the largest bouquet of white lilies right on the entry table. I felt a surge of healing and strength. For once, the spotlight would be mine. By 2:30 p.m., the catering arrived. The spread looked like something out of a magazine. I tipped the delivery drivers $100 each, a small price for the pride I felt. I checked my reflection in the mirror, straightened my collar, and waited. 3 p.m. arrived. Silence. I told myself it was just Seattle traffic. 3:15 p.m. Still nothing. My phone sat on the counter, cold and quiet. By 3:45 p.m., the silence in my home felt heavy, almost suffocating. I paced the length of my kitchen. The sunlight streamed across the untouched artisanal cheeses, making the edges of the brie look oily. I sent a group text, my thumbs trembling slightly. "Everything is ready. Food is hot and the bar is open. Can't wait to see you all." 10 minutes passed. My mother's name finally popped up, running a bit behind. "Start without us." My stomach did a slow, painful flip. Start without who? The house was a tomb. By 4:15, I stopped pacing and just stood at the front window, watching the empty street. No cars, no laughter, no slamming doors. The fresh flowers I'd been so proud of now looked like a funeral arrangement for a life I thought I had built. I called my mother. It went straight to voicemail. I tried my father. Same result. A cold, prickly sensation of trauma began to crawl up my spine. Finally, I messaged Aunt Clara. Clara, is everything okay? Are you guys close? It took an eternity for 3 dots to appear. So sorry for the delay, Elias. We'll be at the party soon. Her phrasing hit me like a physical blow. Not we'll be at your house, but at the party. A dark intuition made me open the family tracking app. Aunt Clara wasn't in my neighborhood. Neither were my parents. They were all clustered together in an area of the city known for its trendy, overpriced high-rises. With shaking hands, I opened Instagram. I didn't even have to search. My cousin Chloe's story was at the very top. I clicked it, and the sound of a rowdy crowd blasted through my silent living room. There was my father, laughing with a beer in his hand. There was my mother, hugging Aunt Clara. And there, in the center of a cramped, modern living room, was Julian. He was holding up a set of keys, his face flushed with the kind of golden child triumph he'd practiced his whole life. The caption read, "Julian's new bachelor pad." Finally moved in, my world tilted. I felt like a scapegoat being led to the slaughter. I wasn't just overlooked. I had been erased. I called Chloe. She picked up on the 5th ring, the sound of a bass drop thumping in the background. "Chloe, where are you?" I asked, my voice sounding like it was coming from a different room. "Elias, hey. We're at Julian's place. Didn't you hear? He got the lease signed yesterday and decided to have an emergency warming since everyone was already going to be in town. It's crazy in here." I felt a surge of toxic dynamic energy boiling over. "Chloe," I said, my voice dead. "My party. The one I invited you to a month ago. The one you RSVP'd to. Did you forget?" There was a long, awkward pause. "Oh. Elias. Was that today? I'm so sorry. I must have confused the dates. Julian just needed the family strength right now, you know? He's finally getting his life together. And your parents thought we should all show up to encourage him. You're already so successful, you don't need the extra push." I hung up before Chloe could offer another hollow excuse. The room seemed to shrink around me. I opened the family group chat, the one I had been posting in for weeks, and scrolled. Nothing. Then, I checked my secondary notification folder. There it was. An entirely separate group chat titled Julian's Big Move. It had been created 48 hours ago. My parents, my aunts, every cousin, everyone was in it except me. Julian had sent a single, poorly spelled message. "Found a place. Move-in is Saturday at 3. Need everyone there for the vibe." Mom and Dad already said yes. The responses were a waterfall of heart emojis. No one had mentioned my housewarming. It was as if my 6 years of disciplined saving and my 1,920 seconds original woodwork were a boring side plot they couldn't wait to skip. I sat on my new sofa, the leather cool and smelling of success, but I felt like a scapegoat in a haunted house. I kept scrolling through the Julian's Big Move chat history, which a disgruntled cousin had accidentally screenshotted to me later. My father's words burned into my retinas. "Don't worry about the deposit, son. We'll cover the Sephora-sized bill for the move-in and the first 4 months of rent. We just want you to feel like a CEO for once. Just don't tell Elias he's so sensitive about earning things." The injustice was a physical weight. They were subsidizing his lifestyle with their retirement while I had survived on ramen and 60-hour weeks to avoid a foreclosure on my dreams. I was an invisible ghost in my own victory. Every photo Julian posted was a jab. He was showing off a view that was really just the brick wall of the neighboring building. He was bragging about smart tech that was just a cheap plastic speaker. But the family was acting like he'd just purchased a $50 million estate. I turned off every light in the house, one by one. The warm glow was gone. In the dark, my phone buzzed. It was an Instagram notification. Julian had tagged me. I opened it to see him holding a beer bottle, grinning like a thief. The caption was the ultimate insult. "New beginnings. Sorry Elias couldn't make it to the real party. Guess he was too busy with his craftsman project. Next time, bro." He was publicly painting me as the arrogant, distant brother who couldn't be bothered to show up for him, while he had systematically hijacked my entire support system. I didn't cry. The time for tears had passed during those long nights in my one-bedroom apartment. Instead, a cold, hard strength began to settle in my chest. I looked at the gourmet sandwiches curling at the edges and the expensive scotch. I walked to the front door and locked the deadbolt. 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I peered through the security camera. It was Arthur, Martha, and Julian, standing on my porch at 8:15 p.m., looking like they expected a standing ovation for finally arriving 5 hours late. I didn't rush to the door. I let the bell echo through the 1,920 seconds original woodwork for a full minute before I finally turned the handle. My mother stepped in with a practiced artificial brightness, clutching a grocery store cake as if it could compensate for the favoritism of a lifetime. "Elias, honey, we're so sorry about the scheduling mix-up. Can we come in? The curb appeal on this place is just divine." I didn't move. I stood like a stone pillar in my own foyer. "Why are you here, Mom? The party ended at 6. The guests you all convinced to stay away have been gone for hours, mostly because they never arrived." My father cleared his throat, leaning against the doorframe with that dismissive shrug he used whenever he didn't want to deal with my sensitivity. "Now, Elias, don't be dramatic. There was a misunderstanding. Julian's move was a sudden thing, a real strength milestone for him. We had to be there to ensure he didn't stumble." Julian was behind them, leaning against his phone, his face a mask of bored indifference. "Yeah, bro. It's just a house. It'll still be here tomorrow. My place is a one-time vibe thing." I really looked at him and saw the toxic dynamic for exactly what it was. "Your place that Dad is paying for? The one with the Sephora-sized security deposit that came out of their retirement?" The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. My mother's smile cracked like old porcelain. "How did you?" "Elias, that's not the point. Julian is at a critical juncture. You've always been our rock, the one with the 4-point GPA and the 60-hour weeks. You don't need us the way he does." I felt a laugh bubbling up, bitter and jagged. "So because I'm capable, I'm invisible. Because I worked until my hands bled to buy this craftsman-style home, my achievements are just investments, while his basic adult functions are treated like a coronation?" Julian smirked, a flash of pure triumph crossing his eyes when our parents weren't looking. "Maybe if you weren't such a boring software engineer, people would actually want to hang out with you, Elias. You've got a chip on your shoulder the size of the Space Needle." That was it. The final thread snapped. "There won't be a rescheduled housewarming," I said, my voice dropping to a cold, predatory whisper. "And as of right now, none of you are welcome in this sanctuary. I am done being the scapegoat for Julian's failures. I'm done being the safety net for a family that views me as an insurance policy rather than a son." My father's face turned a deep, angry red. "You can't talk to us this way. What will the neighbors think if we leave now?" I stepped back and began to close the door. I stopped caring what people think the moment I realized I was celebrating my life alone in a room full of gourmet sandwiches. Good night. The week following the door slam was the quietest of my life. My phone, once a source of constant toxic dynamic pings from the family chat, went stone cold. I had blocked Julian and muted my parents, effectively cutting the umbilical cord that had been strangling my strength for nearly 3 decades. I took a week of emotional leave from my job as a software engineer, but I didn't spend it in bed. I spent it living. I woke up every morning in my craftsman-style home, watching how the sunlight streamed through the windows I had polished with my own sweat. I realized that the foreclosure of my relationship with my blood relatives was actually the opening of a massive credit line for my mental health. I started seeing a specialist, Dr. Eris, who helped me navigate the healing process. "Elias," he said during our second session, "you've spent your life being the scapegoat for Julian's incompetence. You weren't a son to them, you were a benchmark for his failure." Hearing that was like a crown being placed on my head. I finally gave myself permission to stop being the responsible one for people who didn't respect me. But the real shift happened when my coworkers found out what had happened. My team lead, a guy named Marcus, didn't just offer sympathy. He rallied the troops. That Saturday, 12 people from the office showed up at my door. They didn't come because they had to, they came because they wanted to. My living room, once a scene of overlooked misery, was suddenly filled with the scent of real gourmet sandwiches and the sound of genuine laughter. My colleague Sarah brought a hand-thrown ceramic bowl, a piece of strength and art, for my coffee table, We sat around that oak table I'd bought for my parents, but it was filled with chosen family. People who knew my 4-point GPA wasn't a fluke but a result of my strength. As we sat in the warm glow of the fireplace, I realized that family isn't a matter of DNA. It's a matter of who shows up when the house is empty. A month later, a heavy box arrived via FedEx. It was from Aunt Clara. Inside, she had packed my old high school yearbooks, my coding trophies, and a small, weathered wooden box I'd carved in 8th grade. On top was a note: "I am so sorry I let Julian hijack that day. Your grandfather and I always saw your strength, even when your parents were blinded. These belong in a home built on truth. Call me when the healing feels real." I sat on the floor of my home office, surrounded by the 1,920 original woodwork, and I didn't feel like an invisible child anymore. I felt like a CEO of my own destiny. I began reaching out to the extended family on my own terms one-on-one, no Julian allowed. Many of them admitted they had hated the favoritism for years but didn't know how to break the cycle. I was the one who finally broke it. 3 months into my new life of setting boundaries, the inevitable happened. My phone vibrated with a text from a number I hadn't unblocked yet. Julian. The tone was uncharacteristically stripped of its usual golden child arrogance. "Lease is up for renewal. Parents said they can't cover the jump in rent. Can we talk?" I didn't rush to reply. I took a long walk through my garden, admiring the cedar trees and the sense of strength I had cultivated. When I finally met him at a neutral coffee shop, Julian looked haggard. The bachelor pad had been a short-lived dream. Without Arthur and Martha's constant injections of cash, he had collapsed under the weight of real-world bills. "They cut you off?" I asked, sipping my black coffee. Julian nodded, staring at his shoes. "They said after our blow-up at your place, they did some soul-searching. Realized they were making me weak while pushing you away. I lost the apartment, Elias. I'm staying on Chloe's couch." I didn't feel a surge of petty joy. I felt a profound sense of healing. The truth had finally set all of us free. "I'm not going to bail you out, Julian," I said firmly. "But I will listen if you want to talk about how to actually build a life." For the first time in 29 years, my brother didn't smirk. He just listened. Arthur and Martha eventually reached out for a formal sit-down. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Years of favoritism and toxic dynamic behavior don't vanish overnight. It was a start. They admitted they had used my strength as an excuse to neglect my heart. Now, we meet for a quiet dinner once a month. No Julian-centered emergencies allowed. They finally see the software engineer not as a bank account, but as a son who earned his crown. I recently framed an old photo Aunt Clara sent me. It's a grainy shot of me at 7, teaching a 4-year-old Julian how to fix a broken toy. I'm focused, and he's looking at me with pure, unadulterated awe. I hung it in my office, surrounded by the 1,920 original woodwork. It reminds me that while we can't choose our starting point, we can absolutely choose our destination. My dream house isn't just a building anymore. It's a living testament to strength, healing, and the power of walking away to find yourself. Have you ever had to be the strong one while someone else got all the credit? How did you finally find the strength to stand up for your own achievements? Share your journey in the comments below. Let's support each other in building homes and lives that truly honor who we are. Don't forget to like and subscribe to join our family of survivors. Remember, the most important home you'll ever build is the one inside yourself. Thank you for listening.